All right, here we go. All right, okay, so tēnā koutou, e te mana whenua tēnā koutou. Ko Julie Rucklidge tōku anua nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. What a pleasure to be able to speak at this Nerd Night about something that is really passionate and really important to me, and that's about the food environment. And so I've got 4 parts to my talk. I'm going to talk about the problem, which everyone probably knows about, so I will briefly discuss the mental health crisis. I'm going to talk about my journey and research to help contextualize why I'm here today. I'm going to talk about what my research really tells us about the food environment and maybe some ideas of where we can go from here. So here we have the South Island, and the South Island has about 1 million people on it, so that's about 1/5 of the population, and that's the number of people who are struggling with a mental health problem in any one given year. The numbers are rising. If you look at stats, for example, for young people, there's about 1/4 of young people in 2019 were identified as having a probable mood disorder, whereas that number was 13% in 2012. So any stats you look at, you'll see it going up. Our treatments do help some people, but not enough people are getting better. And if we look at, say, for example, antidepressants, there's been no change in terms of relapse rates and recovery rates over the last 70 years relative to how we were going before the advent of medications. There's no real psychotherapy on the horizon, and there's no real new drugs on the horizon unless you count psychedelics. So, let me tell you about my story. So in 1988, I went to McGill and did my undergraduate degree in neurobiology. And then I went and moved to the other side of Canada and went to the University of Calgary, where I did a master's and PhD in clinical psychology. While I was there, my supervisor at the time, Professor Bonnie Kaplan, told me about some families from southern Alberta, Canada, who were using nutrients, vitamins and minerals in a pill form to help alleviate some really serious psychiatric problems like bipolar disorder, psychosis, depression. My training in clinical psychology had taught me that nutrition was absolutely irrelevant to brain health. And that's pretty much what your training would get you today if you go through any kind of mental health professional training. And that only psychotherapy or medications could treat these really serious concerns. But she and others published preliminary data in the early part of this century showing people getting well and staying well with these nutrients. So I moved to New Zealand and I decided to study it. And so collectively, so I am going to summarize 2 decades of research in 1 slide. Excellent. Oh, you're happy because I'm just going to do it in 1 slide. Otherwise, no graphs, none of that. So, my lab and those around the world have shown that the use of vitamins and minerals in a pill form, usually above the recommended dietary allowance, but below at the level where it becomes toxic and starts to cause harm, has been shown to reduce behavioral problems in children, help alleviate symptoms associated with autism and ADHD, reducing aggression and violence in prisoners, helping speed up recovery from depression, helping people overcome anxiety, stress, PMS, help people quit smoking at a rate that's better than the current funded treatments, slow cognitive decline in the elderly, and then the most recent study that was published on Monday from my lab was helping alleviate antenatal depression and having better outcomes for infants, as well as reducing rates of postnatal depression. This is done with minimal side effects and no withdrawal if you stop the micronutrients. And so what does this tell you then about the food environment? For me, I was, with no education in nutrition, I had to kind of stop and go, well, hold on. I was told that we should just eat a healthy diet, and as long as you eat a healthy diet, then you don't need to supplement. But if that was the case, that we were all eating a healthy diet, then we should not be observing all of these findings, because you wouldn't need those additional nutrients that you're getting out of these pills. So it made me realize this. is that supplementation is simply proof of principle, that the food environment is a mismatch. Our current food environment is a mismatch for our brain's needs. So let me just tell you briefly about your brain. There it is. Well, actually, this is an unashamed plug for my book. It is, I like to say that it punches above its weight. It's 2% of body weight, and yet it consumes between 20 to 40% of the nutrients that you eat. So when you predominantly are feeding your brain. And so why do you need these vitamins and minerals in particular? Because they're not really talked about. Like if you look at a food package, they're going to tell you about fats and carbs and proteins, or maybe the calories, but they're really going to overlook these really important, much smaller molecules that are really important for your health. And they are absolutely essential for signaling. So messages from one neuron to another require something that's called neurotransmitter. And the manufacture of your neurotransmitters, like serotonin, like dopamine, is entirely dependent on the availability of vitamins and minerals. You need to support these mitochondria, which are in every cell in your body. They make something that's called ATP, adenotriphosphate, and that's important energy molecule. So if you're not feeding your mitochondria properly in order to provide these vitamins and minerals that are necessary to make ATP, then you're going to start feeling slow and sluggish and low energy. We need these micronutrients to support our inflammatory processes. We need them to keep our genes and DNA healthy, and we need them to support detoxification pathways. And there are many, many other things that they do, but these are some of the highlights in terms of brain function. So a simple Chemistry 101 lesson on brain metabolism is this: is you go from chemical A to chemical B, could be tryptophan to serotonin. Tryptophan is an amino acid that you get out of your food. Serotonin is something that's important for mood regulation. You need an enzyme, and you need vitamins and minerals. And it's really important to say here is that there isn't a special nutrient. And I get that asked that all the time, even after I've said this. And that's more likely with you guys, potentially, if you're drinking, right? You won't have necessarily heard what I said. So listen carefully. Don't ask this question. What's that special nutrient, Julia, that I should take? Is it vitamin D? Is it vitamin C? Is it zinc? No, there isn't a special nutrient. You need them all, and there's about 30 of them that are essential that you need to consume on a daily basis to get that full array of nutrients. Okay. So now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is going back to that healthy diet that I thought we were all eating. We're not, okay? Now, when I first started in this space and started talking about my micronutrient research, I was really, really reluctant to talk about the food environment because I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a nutritionist, I have no education in food at all whatsoever. If I look at my childhood, I had Cheerios and with sugar on top, like a teaspoon. Did anybody else here do that? I was allowed to do that? Well, I was allowed to do that. And I am not talking about those red Cheerio things. I'm talking about the cereal, okay? Just in case you're wondering. I think that's because that would be a really weird thing to have for breakfast. I had plastic cheese and a bun. I mean, this was like, this is terrible. My son is in the audience. No, you're not allowed this stuff. I mean, he's grown up now. He's probably eating it now when he's flatting, but was not allowed to do that at home. Even now, people catch me doing this. Like, there I am reaching for the gummy bear. And so you really are gonna trust me, what I have to say about food? And finally, here's another good one. This was given to me. My brother showed this picture about a month ago. We're going through some old slides. So if you can figure this out, that's me. And look at, what the hell? My mother gave me a Coca-Cola. I was like 1. Okay. So, you got me here. Unless there's someone else who wants to come up and finish the talk and tell you about food. I think the advantage I have is that I go into this incredibly naively with a blank slate, but an inquiring mind. And so I've gone in and stood in supermarkets looking at the packages and trying to figure out what is it that we're communicating to the public about food. But the reason why this is so important is that when we look at a population level, how much of the different types of food groups are we eating, it's not a pretty picture. We've gone from eating mostly whole foods, that's our ancestors would have eaten mostly whole foods, to processing food, which in itself is not necessarily a bad thing because that's like cooking with fire would be a type of processing. Pasteurization, canning, freezing, those are all a form of processing. You can still retain the nutrient density and content of that food. The main problem is the ultra-processed products. These are industrialized produced edible substances that are defined since 2009 by a Brazilian scientist, a guy called Dr. Monteiro. And what he did was that he came up with a definition which we didn't have before. And this has proved to be incredibly useful to say this is how we're going to define it. One, it needs to be chemically altered in some way. And number two, it has to have ingredients in there that you don't find in your kitchen, okay? So when you think about it that way, anyone should be able to identify an ultra-processed product based on that definition. But I will test you. But the scary thing is this, is that half of the calories that we're eating at a population level are coming from ultra-processed foods. And even more scary is the data in New Zealand that 42% of the calories of 1-year-olds are coming from this UPF, and it's 53% for our 5-year-olds. Now you might say, maybe is that formula? Well, partly it is formula, but that only counts for 9% of those percentages of that 42%. So younger and younger, we are introducing these foods into the diet. So what's wrong with this? So I want to tell you 3 things that I see as being the predominant problem with the ultra-processed foods. The first one is the obvious one, and that is the sugar. And you've heard all about the sugar content. And if we believed what the food industry has told us is that we've taken the sugar out, then we should have solved all of our chronic health issues. And so how are we going with that? Anybody know? We've got increase in diabetes, type 2 diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular, cancers, mental health. All of them have been linked, associated, even showing causal association between eating the ultra-processed foods over a long period of time and the development of these chronic health issues. So we have some pretty robust data in this space. So sugar, yes. I looked it up. How are we doing in New Zealand? On average, we consume 54 kilograms of sugar per year. Well, I decided not to bring that in. But I have 37 teaspoons. Now, my 1 teaspoon of sugar on my Cheerios really does pale in comparison to that. There's 15 teaspoons of sugar in an energy drink. There's 9 teaspoons of sugar in a fruit juice. There's sugar in everything. You're ready to eat meals, your spaghetti, even your condiments. And I've got another one. That's how much sugar there is in your ketchup. Do you ever, you could do it. You just look on the back and you can figure it out. This was not rocket science. So it's in all of our ultra-processed products. So this is one of, certainly a problem because the WHO says you should, about 6 times less of what we're actually eating because that's what we can process and what our body can get rid of and metabolize. Once you get up to that 37, then you end up having major metabolic disorders. Okay, but this is the one that we don't really talk about. And that is all the things that are added to the product in order to make it taste good and have a really long shelf life. So that's things like your emulsifiers. Now you will find, now that you've heard that word, and you've probably heard it before, and it's just your ability to just mix your oil with your water. Think of a detergent would be an emulsifier. It is in almost every ultra-processed product out there. I've sadly looked at, even these things, these chocolate things that I thought were really good. Damn, they got emulsifiers in there. Your sugar sweeteners, your aspartame, there's lots of data now showing that that is not helping us in terms of reducing our weight long-term, and that there are other health issues that are associated with that. You've got your colors and your other additives and your thickeners, all of these things that you're going to see on the back of an ultra-processed package. And the reason why you need to care about this stuff, which really isn't talked about because the only thing we ever talk about when it comes to food is fat and sugar, is that these are now being identified and linked to affecting your microbiome. And given that that was actually the topic that we've been listening to actually with earlier, that whether you sit down to poo, or what was it peeing? That you want to care, clearly we all care about this topic, and that is that it's the health of your microbiome. And we have a rising number of people who are struggling with things like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and what's happening is that these extra things that are in the foods are just eating away at your gut lining, which is making it leaky and then allowing stuff to go into your bloodstream and then cause havoc. And the other challenge that we have with the more you eat ultra-processed foods, then the less you eat fiber, and the bacteria in your gut, they need to eat something, and they really like to eat fiber, but if you're not giving it fiber because it's not in those foods, then again, it starts to eat away at your gut lining. So there's research now that's associating all these added products to the development of mood and mental health disorders. So it's something we really should be caring about, and you're going to start noticing that more and more of that research coming out over the next 5 to 10 years. So then the third thing that I want to talk about is nutritional displacement. So going back to what I was telling you about before, which was about those micronutrients and how it seemed that when we gave people those extra nutrients, we showed benefit in terms of their mental health challenges, not for everyone, but lots of people we've seen improve. And so it makes us have to stop and think about whether or not those vitamins and minerals are contained within ultra-processed products. And so what I've done here on the y-axis is I've put a whole bunch of vitamins and minerals, couldn't fit them all, but there's some examples there. And I'm going to show you different ultra-processed products relative to the recommended dietary allowance. Now, I'm not a big fan of the RDA, but it's a metric that most people are familiar with, or the DV. It's on, again, all of your packages. It'll say something like it's got vitamin C, 0% of DV. So that just means there's not any of it in there. I don't know why that was funny. Okay, so how are we and the reason why I don't like the RDA is that it's sort of a number that helps make sure that you don't get scurvy or rickets, but it's not identifying the percentage of a vitamin and mineral that you need for brain health. The RDAs were not developed with the brain in mind. But let's go through it. So the first one is a donut, and the next one is the favorite Kiwi thing, which is the hot dog. The next one is Spam, which I've never come across. That's spiced ham. Then there's small French fries, and then there's a slice of white bread, and then a tablespoon of margarine, and then a soft drink, which has got 0 nutrients in there. Nothing was there. 5 crackers. So now let's look at some real whole foods. And the first one is the kiwi icon, the kiwi fruit. Cup of kale, half a fillet of salmon, a cup of lentils, a banana, 100 grams of steak, an egg, and 6 Brazil nuts. So, do you see the problem? So the more we're eating those ultra-processed foods, the more you're going to end up with this what I call nutritional displacement, and the less of these vitamins and minerals you're going to get. And so I see that as being really an important third problem of the ultra-processed diet. And so what do we know about the relationship between eating these foods and our mental health? And we have an amazing amount of research now over the last 2 decades that really robustly shows that the more you are eating these diets which are high in your oily fish, your healthy fats, your omega-3 fatty acids, your grass-fed meat, your legumes, your nuts, your seeds, your fruits and vegetables, then the lower your risk for mental health problems. And the more you eat foods that are high in the takeaway and the sugary drinks and then low in your fruits and vegetables, then the greater the likelihood of mental illness. And we know this across the lifespan. So there's research, for example, where what mom is eating during her pregnancy influences not only the outcome in terms of her mental health, but also the outcome for her infant. So for every daily additional sugar-sweetened beverage that she drinks during pregnancy reduces on average the IQ of her offspring by 1 point. Yeah. You thought, alcohol has this similar kind of influence. So this is something we need to pay attention to, and people should know about this research. And it goes up. I mean, the effect is, dose dependent. In childhood, we know that the more a child eats these ultra-processed foods, and the greater their risk for having ADHD. In adulthood, we know that the consumption of these foods is associated with depression, anxiety. In the elderly, we know that this is associated and can influence the development of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's. Now, it's not to say that if you ate a donut today, that it's all bad news from here. Of course not. You can have the donut. But it's about that cumulative effect over a long period of time. It's about this being the predominant foods that you eat over and over again as your sort of main dietary pattern, and that's where we start to see these risks and these associations. And also longitudinally seeing that what you eat today can predict your mental health down the road. And the good news, though, is that the more you eat these, if you take someone who's struggling with their mood and you look at their diet and their diet sort of aligns with this ultra-processed types of foods, then helping them shift their diet can help them go into remission. You can you can change that outcome in terms of cognitive decline. There's some amazing research that's showing just shifting people's diets can have a really positive impact on these outcomes. So there's really wonderful good news stories here about where we change our food environment can really have an impact on our mental health. So here's the obvious solution, is just tell everyone to eat better. And so it leaves me thinking, do people really know how to eat better? And I don't know. I'm going to tell you a story. Anybody seen these? Yeah? Hands up. Who's had one? I can't see anything. Oh my God. There's a lot of people here. Those lights are just insane. Wow. Okay, you've had it now. Did you think it was good? No. Oh, you knew it. Okay, let me read what's on the packet. It says it's 5-star rating. Okay. It's low in sodium and fat, source of fiber, and less than 100 grams. 100 calories. So an incredible product. It's 70% pea, but it is ultra processed because it's got a whole bunch of things that have been added to it, like maltodextrin, yeast extract, vegetable oil, flavor enhancer 635, anti-caking agent, acidity regulator, stabilizer. Did you know that? Who turned it over? So, but funnily, this was given to me by a group of people who were doing a well-being conference. Okay, so which tells you that people don't necessarily, you get fooled. You do get easily fooled by what's on the packet. The star rating system really drives me nuts. How am I doing on time? Oh, I'm at the end. Oh, well, that's good, because I'm almost at the end. But the 5-star rating is based on being low in calories, low in salt, low in sugar, low in fat, and fortified with 1 nutrient will give you 5 stars. So I don't know if they were maybe talking about the package here. Okay, so let's try another test though, quick test. Ultra-processed, real food. Yeah, well done. See, this is not hard, but it says it's got a 4.5-star rating, and it has got apparently 11 vitamins and minerals in it, and it's high in fiber. There's your ingredient list for your up and go. And I have students who will bring this to my class on mental health and food because it's advertised as having those nutrients that I study. So, how about this one? Homemade, yeah. It's processed. It's fine. It's made in your kitchen. All those ingredients can be in your kitchen. And then the last one, really tough. Actually, this goes to Tracy's talk, doesn't it? All right, banana. Okay. So, how can we go forward? I think we need to educate the public on what's real food and how to eat in season, and we need to be talking about how to grow food, where to source it, that food, canning and freezing is perfectly okay. And we also need to make sure that this is talked about in the public healthcare system. Address the commercial determinants of health, the food deserts, fast food outlets, sponsorships, honest advertising on products, the fiscal levers that can influence things like the taxing or subsidizing, export. I just really been thinking a lot about this. We have enough food in New Zealand to feed 40 million people, and yet we have 17% of primary school kids are identifying food insecurity. So there's something going wrong here in terms of our priorities. A proactive industry that supplies nourishing food and changing our choice architecture, and then finally whether or not those nutrients that I've been studying forever and ever might one day get funded. So randomized trials in the 1600s showed that putting limes aboard ships headed out for long voyages completely eliminated the 40% mortality from scurvy, but it took 264 years for the British government to mandate that all ships must carry citrus for their sailors. Clearly they didn't have the internet back then. So how long is it going to take us to sort of recognize that suboptimal nutrition is contributing to the mental health crisis? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, it works now. So we have time for a few questions, if anyone has any.
Hello, thanks for that. So you mentioned very briefly that RDI wasn't designed with... I'm over here. Yeah. RDI wasn't designed with brain nutrition in mind. Do we actually have a system which is, or... Gotcha, good question. Is anyone working towards it?
Not that I'm aware of. They once in a while they do update them, but no, I don't, and I don't know why they're not doing something about this. I think there's a benefit to the food industry for keeping it really low.
Thanks for that talk. Has anybody done any studies on whether different parts of the country have different minerals and stuff in the soil?
Yeah, sure. There is studies. We know that, for example, iodine can be really depleted in some areas of New Zealand, so this is well known. But when we look at soils in general, we can see that there's depletions that are happening in many of the minerals. That's one that's particularly well identified in New Zealand. But you can see that there's depletions because of the way we are, our agricultural processes are now, that we don't let the soil rest, we don't properly remineralize the soil, We use things like glyphosate, which we know is a mineral chelator, which can grab onto minerals, and when it rains, it just can wash that away. So it does, the challenge is that our soils are going to likely be depleted in more than just one mineral. There are researchers who are really keen to do some research on this, and I've been in dialogue with them on this to try to get a really good sense of it now, as well as whether or not our food is more depleted now than it was. There's research internationally, though, that shows that the peach of today is not the same as the peach that your grandmother ate.
I really like your graphic on the RDA. The question, what are your thoughts on homogenized milk?
Do you want to drink it? Do you make it?
Well, no, but it's highly processed. It's not really natural milk, but
Yeah.
it is milk.
Yeah, you won't believe it, but I was actually at a talk about milk today. And I learned that the food matrix of milk is not affected by things like homogenization. So that's what they talked about. That was one of the things that we talked about. And so in terms of changing the nutritional quality of the milk, I don't think it would have an impact.
Hi.
Is it the same corner?
Yeah, same corner. Hi. Just sharing the microphone around down here. Do you have any multivitamins that you particularly recommend?
There's always one. And so what I didn't say is that I am not funded by the supplement industry, but I'm very happy to tell you what we've been studying recently, and that's a product that's called Daily Essential Nutrients. I don't see it as being magical. It's just got the full array of the nutrients. There are other products out there that have been studied. If you want to know all of the different supplements that have been studied, then get my book out of the library. There's lots of copies, and I get some money when you take it out, apparently. So, or you can buy it. I mean, it's sold at UBS bookstore. Because in there, I'll tell you all about the different supplements. But really, it is proof of principle of this idea that the food environment is not meeting our brain's needs. The other thing you can do is email my lab, and I have students ready on call to answer your email, and that's mentalhealthnutrition@canterbury.ac.nz.
Great, we have time for one more. Okay, I'm not trying to be cheeky, but this does actually go off the back of the other question. My impact of your presentation was that the additives to the food are significant, and there is a deficit of nutrients. So, what's your personal opinion on taking some kind of supplement while keeping your general food processing the same, or do you think it's way more significant to reduce your processed foods in general rather than just taking a supplement?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. People always wonder why I look so young. So I always say food first. Absolutely, food first. My research is saying food first because the nutrients you get out of your food are way better absorbed out of your food than they are out of a supplement. So absolutely start changing and reducing and replacing your ultra-processed products with your real whole or minimally processed foods. And that is the first thing that I would love people to take away from my research and from my talk. There are a number of reasons why some people might need additional nutrients and what they can get out of their food. One of them was already discussed, which is that there is these depletions in the minerals in our soil. We choose and select foods that grow really quickly, have a high yield. They're pretty, they store well, they transport well, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily nutrient rich. There's individual reasons why some people might need more nutrients. We call them inborn errors of metabolism. If If you remember the one graph I showed you, or A to B, the chemical A to B, there was an enzyme. And there can be errors in that making of that enzyme, which means it doesn't work quite the way it should. It works, but it needs a bit of help. And the way to help it is to give more of those cofactors, which are the vitamins and minerals, so you can support people in that way. Other things like life events, stressors, certain stages of life, like teenagers going through growth spurts, their nutritional needs are much higher, or towards the end of the life, or whether or not you use medications that reduce your, they can cause some depletions in specific nutrients, things like statins, antidepressants, aspirin, contraceptive pill. They're all known to cause some nutritional depletions. So there are reasons why you might want to supplement, or you just can't be bothered to cook. So there are things that or it's tough, or it's challenging. So for all of those reasons, I don't even know if I answered your question. Did I? It was that yes, is that under those circumstances, then it would be that could be necessary and really be valuable, particularly for stress, to just add a little bit in, particularly of B vitamins.
Thank you so very much. What a fascinating presentation and a great question. Thank you.